Alrighty guys, hello and welcome back to the show. So today we are going to be continuing our saga into the Nomads. Are they balanced? Are they broken? Do they suck? Find out all out here on these videos. That was corny, but we're gonna go with it. So Navy is actually my favorite area to play within Supreme Commander. I end up playing air a lot for God knows why, because I suck at it, but I love playing Navy. This is probably my favorite position to play. So I'm really hoping that the Nomads have a good naval complement here. As with the land video, link in the description if you haven't seen it, as well as a link to the very first part of this series. This is part 3 that you guys are looking at right now. We're going to be summarizing interesting things on the 3 tiers, looking at areas of opportunity or areas of vulnerability. As a side note, had a lot of fun with this series, so it has been a lot of work though, so please give it a like and also consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. Tier 1. Tier 1 is arguably one of the most important tiers within the Navy game because first off, it sets the stage. It allows you to get control of the water area and you can completely shut your opponent out of the Navy, whereas it's very hard to shut your opponent out of any of the other the land and the air game early on, while with the Navy it's actually a possibility. And that is held up by the frigate. So the frigates are pretty much the backbone of your Navy. It's pretty rare that you'll ever stop building frigates in a Navy game unless you get to super late game. But normally frigates are always going to have a presence either as your primary offensive weapon at tier 1 or as kind of a bullet sponge for your more valuable ships at tiers 2 and 3. So the Nomads frigate does unfortunately not stand toe-to-toe with the other frigates. This is primarily due to its lower health. It does also lack anti-aircraft, so it's similar to the Aeon frigate in that sense. And while it's not quite as bad in terms of cost as the Aeon frigate, it's not great compared to the King of the Oceans, which has named the Trident, who incidentally Poseidon I guess also has a Trident, so I wonder if that was a little thing that was happening there. So it's not a great frigate. I don't think it's terrible, but it doesn't really shine. To augment the frigate, and I think actually what really gives the Nomads T1 Navy its competitive edge in the water is the Defender. And the Defender gives, first off, anti-aircraft to the Nomads Navy, but unlike the Aeon Navy, where the attack boat is also your anti-aircraft, the Nomads Defender also gives additional functionality outside of just having anti-aircraft, and it's T1 tactical missiles. I believe this is the only faction to have tactical missiles at Tech 1 in any way, shape, or form, even outside of just the Navy, and this allows the Nomads to be incredibly effective at harassing enemy emplacements with T1 Navy. All of a sudden, mexes that were previously safe on points of reach from Navy are now under threat if you have a couple of defenders within the mix. And this is going to be something that is going to be incredibly difficult to deal with and really allows for, if the Nomads can gain naval superiority, they can then do a lot of damage with it at Tech 1, where the other factions are very limited by the range of the frigates. So lastly is the sub. It's not used extensively at Tech 1 normally. It's a sub. It trades fine with the other subs. There's nothing super special about it. The only real difference is it's missing its deck gun, so you can't surface it and use it to shoot at enemy frigates, which, like you guys, I am outraged about that. Like, how do you make a submarine without including a deck gun? That's just absurd. Have you ever seen a submarine that doesn't have a deck gun? And I'm totally kidding. The deck gun on most subs are like decorative deck guns, kind of like the back seats of my car, which is decorative back seats. There's no way anybody could actually fit in those back seats. So T1 I think is going to struggle a little bit in a stand-up fight from the Nomads, but I think with proper play, the Nomads, if they get an edge in the Navy, they can do far more damage to the opposing player than a normal T1 Navy would from the other factions. So I think it's a high risk, high reward kind of T1 Navy. Let's move on to Tech 2. Tech 2 is very vanilla for the Nomads. It's strong with the 2 units that it has, but it doesn't have any utility units. So think again, it's kind of like the Seraphim in this particular instance. So we've got a destroyer and we've got a cruiser. So the destroyer for Nomads, it is actually very strong, similar to the Exodus, but a little bit more on the glass cannon side. So a little bit less health, but higher damage. There's also a little There's also a little damage over time kind of element, and it uses its railguns in lieu of torpedoes, which is a theme for the faction except for the submarines. The submarines, I guess, didn't get the memo about the railgun overhaul to their torpedo launchers, but so the destroyer has railguns instead of torpedo launchers, which is nice because it doesn't get affected by torpedo defense, as far as I can tell. It is also lacking anti-aircraft like the Exodus, which you could make a case is fine because destroyer anti-aircraft is kind of terrible anyway, but every little bit helps whenever 70 torpedo bombers show up over your fleet and you have somebody like me playing air, and the few ASF that I was able to scrape up while my opponent was out ecoing me are busy having dinner and drinks near my base, camping around a nice little fire and just shooting the shit instead of actually covering my allies. Moving on to the cruiser. So the cruiser has no direct fire cannon, unlike everybody except for the Aeon and the Seraphim. So I guess that would make it in the majority at that point. I wrote that poorly in my script. But in its place, they do get some utility from their EMP cannon, which is okay. It's not great. The AoE seems to be pretty limited on it. So the EMP cannon from the EMP tank on the land side was pretty reliably able to take 2, 3, sometimes even 4 units out of play. The cruiser, just with how far naval units usually end up getting spread out in engagements, doesn't take out quite as many. You might get lucky and get 2 taken out of the fight, but by and large, it's going to be a little bit more isolated. So you'll have to pay a little bit more attention to micro that appropriately. The anti-air is pretty much in line with the other factions. It's not super strong. It's not super weak. Nothing about that was very special. So Tech 2 Navy, pretty strong for the Nomads, but I don't think it's broken. I think it's slightly better than Aeon since they have EMP on the cruiser. But I think that the fact that they're lacking any sort of utility, like the Coopers or the Mermaids, or any sub-hunters of any sort, I think bring it back a little bit as far as whether making it broken. So it's good, not great. I give it like a solid B. Tech 3. So first, we got to talk about this battleship. So the Juggernaut sits right in the middle as far as battleships go in ship-to-ship combat. It loses out against the Omen, performs well against the Galaxy, that's kind of right in the middle. Does not dethrone our previous champion. Where this guy gets really, really weird is the anti-aircraft. So most battleships, if they have anti-aircraft, it's completely useless. This guy actually really does well with its anti-aircraft and its flak rockets, and is very, very usable. And running some tests on this, this battleship was able to defend itself against 10 torpedo bombers. It was able to survive with no assistance from any aircraft or any cruisers or anything like that. And take it to the flip side, with the Summit was not able to destroy a single torpedo bomber before it itself succumbed to the waves. So the numbers kind of speak for themselves here. 250 damage per second coming off of the flak rockets of the Nomads battleship versus 14 damage per second. While this is a flat cannon, technically, even though it's a rocket, it is still subject to missing. So it does work great against torpedo bombers and anything that is kind of on approach, but it starts to miss and would miss against like ASFs a good amount of the time, unless there's a large cloud of them sitting over. Next ship of interest is the tactical submarine. This is similar to the Sub Hunter for the Seraphim, but instead of AA, it has EMP tactical missiles. And these Nomads, they really like their EMPs, so if Nomads end up getting added to the main game, it's time to start wrapping everything in tinfoil. Like, not just the hat, I'm talking like everything, full body tinfoil armor from those EMPs. For sub-on-sub action, it does beat the Seraphim Sub Hunter one-on-one, mostly because of its superior range. It does also lack torpedo defense, though, for what it's worth. That being said, even though this sub wins against the other Tech 3 sub in this lineup, I definitely give the edge to the Seraphim here, because even though they lose slightly to the Leviathan, they cost 60% of the mass. So yeah, you can build 3 sub hunters for the cost of 2 of the... You can build 3 Seraphim sub hunters for the cost of 2 of the Leviathans. So even though the Leviathan is slightly superior, you got to give the edge to the Seraphim sub hunters, which are just still incredibly strong. The aircraft carrier is an aircraft carrier. It sits in line, mass cost, HB, AA, and then it builds aircraft. There was nothing super exciting on that one as far as I could tell. Putting a large scale battle together for kicks with about 62,900 mass roughly expended from both sides. For fun, with no micro, the Seraphim ends up winning very, very handedly against the Nomads. Large part of that is due to the sub hunters that are still alive during the battle. Again, though, that's no micro, and it's just like taking two very, very large navies and just kind of slamming them into each other. So, you know, the Seraphim won, but with micro, you could probably pull it off. So, next, I do want to close a loop that I had left open from my last video, which was on hover tanks. So I had a sentence. I can't speak. What is wrong with me? I had a sentence in my last video where I was wondering if it even made sense to build Nomads Navy, or if it was better to just build hover tanks. And so whenever I was testing, the hover tanks absolutely smacked the crap out of the Navy. And not only the Nomads Navy, they smacked the crap out of everybody's Navy. And not only the Nomads hover tanks, but everybody's hover tanks actually smacks the crap out of Navy whenever you're mass normalizing and whenever you're not abusing the range of the additional range of the Navy. So that being said, I don't think that was a fair test. Did want to close the loop on that though. So somebody's throwing a bunch of hover tanks at you, it's time to start kiting a little bit and using your range. Although this gave me an interesting idea for a funny video. So let me know down in the comments below if you want me to subject 3 very unfortunate souls to in a sentence match to me playing only hover tank Navy. I think that could be fun, especially in a beach slot. Just rush T2 land and just spam hover tanks into the ocean. I feel like that could be a lot of fun. I'm like theory crafting it as we go. It would either be it's either going to work really well or it's going to be really terrible. But let me know down in the comments below if that's something you guys want to see. And I'll see if I can find 3 people that either don't know me or are dumb enough to let me try this. All right, final thoughts. Navy at T1 is pretty strong. Artillery boat allows for the T1 to be way more annoying than any other faction, with the ability to range more mexes, more buildings. So if you think about maps like Settons, like Craftius Maximus, Point of Reach, Octavia, the Nomads, T1 can be very, very strong in these maps, threatening starting bases with a lot more danger than normal factions would in those particular scenarios. It also gives you a reason to build your third T1 unit, unlike the Aeon Navy, whereas like in the Aeon Navy, most people don't even build attack boats, at least as far as I can see, because it makes more sense to build interceptors. So it gives you a reason, and quite frankly, a pretty good one, to build that third T1 naval unit. So I'm a fan of the T1 Navy, even though the frigate isn't great. Navy at T2, I think it's lacking a little bit of utility here. We don't have shield boats or counter intel. As far as the core units go, they're pretty good though. And you do get a little bit of utility out of the cruisers EMP. So I give these guys, like I said, solid B. Like, they're good, not great. Navy at Tech 3 is once again, I think it's pretty average, even though the battleship is super strong. The Leviathan is just so obscenely expensive for what you get out of it that you're going to have to invest way more mass than your opponent to actually fight sub hunters, especially if it's a Seraphim on the other side. So I really don't think that the EMP tactical missiles do like next to anything, or enough to make it a compelling add-on or a justification for the 40% increase in cost. All right, so final summation, I guess. I would put their Navy on the weaker side overall, which may seem weird, but because I was like, okay, T1 is strong and then the other 2 tiers are pretty average, but I think that they're on the weaker side overall for one primary reason, and I think that they're very vulnerable to subs. The Tech 3 sub is very, very expensive, and outside of that, they have no real answer for sub hunters or the Atlantis. So every other faction has either a surface ship that absolutely decimates subs, or sub hunters at some tier that they can use to fight units like that. And the Nomads do have this in the Leviathan, but it's very expensive. So I think my recommendation here would be, I don't know, take out the EMP tactical missiles and just make the tier 3 sub much cheaper. Like, I don't know, take out the tactical missiles maybe, and maybe make it like 90% of the cost of the Seraphim sub hunter, because the Seraphim sub hunter has anti-aircraft. So if you just make the Leviathan pure torpedoes, then the Seraphim sub hunter would still have a little bit of extra. I don't know, I'm just theory crafting right now. But that's it for today, guys. Subscribe for more. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.